After a long, exhausting day, Michel Jacobi rode home on a water buffalo, just as he did every day. Even in rural Ukraine, this was a rather unusual way to get around. But soon, he would have to say goodbye to the buffaloes he had grown so close to. He was not selling them for meat. Instead, he was handing them over to an ambitious ecosystem restoration project. In May 2019, the first buffaloes, 5 males and 2 females, including one that was pregnant, were loaded onto an old barge. Before that, they had traveled nearly 1,000 kilometers by road. They were tired but still healthy, as the barge slowly passed through a sensitive border region and headed deep into the wild wetlands of Ermakiv Island. These animals did not tolerate the heat well and seemed to be waiting for the moment they could step ashore. As soon as the doors opened, they charged forward, tearing through enormous reeds that stood twice as tall as an adult, and headed straight for the nearest lake. They soaked in the water for a long time, occasionally flinging thick, black mud across their bodies to cool down and drive away blood-sucking insects. Then, one by one, they disappeared into the empty wilderness. The only people who had come there gradually left as well. 5 years later, they returned, and what they found shocked the world. The story begins in the Danube Delta, a vast wetland covering around 600,000 hectares. It is so large that it feels like an endless maze of waterways, reeds, shallow lakes, and muddy islands stretching all the way to the Black Sea. UNESCO describes it as the largest and best-preserved delta in Europe, home to more than 300 bird species and 45 species of freshwater fish. Rewilding Europe also mentions pelicans, herons, storks, cormorants, terns, otters, wildcats, and European mink species that prove this is far more than just a useless swamp. But just like in every story we have discussed before, humans arrived here in the 1970s, and the entire landscape changed. People built dikes, dug canals, and drained Ermakiv Island simply to create land for farming and livestock. They saw the wetlands as wasted land and proudly called this destruction an engineering success. It was cruel and deeply disappointing. As a result, 96% of Ukraine's wetlands disappeared. But when ecologists pulled apart those thick walls of vegetation, they were shocked by what they found. Look at this. The reeds covered 100% of the area, woven together like a solid concrete blanket that was choking the life out of the wetland. Sunlight had no chance of penetrating through it. Of course, the buffaloes were not brought here simply to eat the reeds. According to a report from Rewilding Europe, dissolved oxygen levels in the water had dropped below 2 to 3 milligrams per liter, causing fish to become stressed, weakened, and eventually suffocate. The food chain began to collapse almost immediately. Fish populations fell by as much as 60%. Insects disappeared, and water birds abandoned the area. The destruction was so severe that one study from the Danube Delta in Romania found that commercial fish production had dropped threefold during the second half of the 20th century because of habitat loss and changes to the natural water system. They had to solve the problem at its source, not just deal with the symptoms. In 2009, they did something completely opposite to what had been done in the 1970s. Instead of building more dikes, they began tearing them down. About 300 meters of dike were open, so that spring floodwaters could flow back into the island. During 2021 and 2022, Rewilding Ukraine removed another roughly 200 meters, with plans to take down the remaining sections so that water could move more naturally around the island. For the first time in years, low-lying areas began flooding again with the seasons. Shallow lakes appeared, mudflats returned, small waterways began to form. Water slowly moved through the openings, flowing back into old lakes and covering the dried mudflats once again. It brought moisture, sediment, and movement back to a landscape that had been without them for far too long. According to Rewilding Europe, oxygen levels in the water rose to between 4 and 6 milligrams per liter, and fish began swimming freely through the newly formed channels. The first battle had been won. But wait, when the water returned, a new problem became clear. The reeds and shrubs had grown far too thick. Many areas were still blocked off, like a room with an open door, but filled with obstacles inside. So why not use excavators or cutting machines? The answer was simple. If heavy machinery were brought in repeatedly, it could sink deep into the soft ground, crush the mud, destroy small organisms, and turn the restoration effort into a new source of damage. They did not need a brutal machine. They needed a living force, something safer, more sustainable, and built for the job. Rewilding Europe and Rewilding Ukraine were the organizations that came up with this idea and immediately put it into action. It sounds strange, doesn't it? But for a wetland, water buffalo are almost the perfect choice. They can handle deep mud, shallow water, rough vegetation, and dense reed beds that many other types of livestock would struggle to survive in. Rewilding Europe describes them as large herbivores capable of creating and maintaining a mosaic landscape across the island, helping support both wildlife and nature-based tourism. But this project would not carry the same emotional weight without Michel Jacobi, a German-born man who had spent many years living in Ukraine, raising and conserving Carpathian water buffalo. He once shared that the buffaloes were not just livestock, they were companions and a part of his life. So when he gave them to the project, it was not a cold business transaction. It felt more like a farewell. One Earth in Manga Bay described how Jacobi donated the buffaloes to the project as part of an effort to use them as ecosystem engineers on Ermakiv Island. These buffaloes came from the Transcarpathia region of western Ukraine, specifically the Tisa River Basin. Before being transported, they were gathered from local farms, given health checks and vaccinations, and gradually introduced to the transportation process. The journey began with a road trip of more than 1,000 kilometers, lasting nearly an entire day and crossing several different types of terrain. After that, they were taken to a dock near the town of Vilkovo, where barges were waiting to carry them across the Danube River. In May 2019, the first 7 buffaloes, 5 males and 2 females, including one that was pregnant, began the long journey. Yes, this was the scene you saw at the beginning. A few weeks later, another 10 buffaloes arrived. The pregnant female later gave birth to a healthy calf, bringing the small herd to 18 animals, an early sign that the project was becoming more than just an idea. But the story did not end there. On the 14th of May 2024, Rewilding Danube Delta reported that 6 more female buffaloes from the Transcarpathia region in the Tisa River Valley had been brought to Ermakiv Island to increase the genetic diversity of the existing herd. The buffalo herd quickly began creating changes that even the scientists had not expected. Water buffalo are not like ordinary cattle. They are built to live in mud, shallow water, reed beds, and difficult wetland conditions. Each buffalo can consume around 25 to 40 kilograms of reeds and wetland vegetation every day. For the entire herd, that adds up to roughly 150 to 250 tons of plant material each year. But the most important impact is not how much vegetation they eat. What matters most is the way they constantly move through reed fields that had grown dense and remained almost completely untouched for decades. An adult buffalo can weigh nearly half a ton. Their body weight alone is enough to crush hardened layers of reeds and create narrow pathways through wetlands that were once almost completely sealed off. A domesticated water buffalo can weigh around 250 to 550 kilograms, making every step a real force on the soft ground. To picture it more clearly, imagine that instead of one solid blanket of dense reeds, the landscape now contains many different patches. Short grass in one area, reeds in another, exposed mud somewhere else, and shallow water nearby. A single buffalo may travel 5 to 10 kilometers per day and range across an area of roughly 50 to 150 hectares. The entire herd can directly influence around 800 to 1,500 hectares, or about 20 to 40% of the island. Do you remember the buffaloes soaking in the mud at the beginning? They also know how to wallow, almost like pigs. Each time they do this, they create small mud holes. Each one may cover only around 10 to 50 square meters, but the herd can maintain between 20 and 50 active wallows. Altogether, that creates hundreds or even thousands of square meters of new microhabitat. These holes hold water during the dry season, remain warmer than the surrounding environment, and become ideal places for insect larvae, frogs, amphibians, and small fish. Then comes the smallest but most important part: mud, manure, and seeds. When buffaloes wallow, the depressions they create can retain water and become habitats for insects, frogs, and other small creatures. When they leave manure behind, nutrients return to the soil, feeding microorganisms and insects, the foundation of the food chain. As they move, seeds cling to their fur or pass through their digestive systems before being deposited somewhere else. Rewilding Europe says water buffalo can disperse the seeds of more than 200 plant species, Rewilding Europe describes water buffalo as some of nature's most skilled engineers. Mikhailo Nestorenko of Rewilding Ukraine explained that, because they are as large as cattle, they can clear shrubs and reed beds while creating small ponds for insects, amphibians, and fish. Now imagine the scene. One buffalo lowers its head and tears away young reed shoots. Another slowly moves through the soft mud, its heavy body pressing old reeds flat and leaving behind a narrow path where sunlight can once again reach the surface of the water. These changes are not loud or dramatic, but they build up day after day. Alongside the buffalo herd, ecologists also reintroduced Konik horses to the area, a semi-wild European breed that can thrive in open, damp, grassy landscapes. If water buffalo act like a trailblazing force in deep mud, dense reeds, and shallow water, Konik horses work in the drier areas. They graze on young grass, keep grasslands short, and prevent any single plant species from dominating the entire landscape. According to the restoration plan, around 15 Konik horses were transported from Latvia and quarantined in Orlovka, across the Danube River from Ermakiv, before joining the natural grazing program. This project is part of a larger restoration initiative supported by the Endangered Landscapes Program, which aims to restore more than 40,000 hectares across the Danube Delta in Romania, Moldova, and Ukraine. The goal is not simply to bring animals back, but to restore the natural processes that have been lost. Seasonal flooding, natural grazing, mud flats, short grasslands, thinner reed beds, and small habitats for fish, insects, amphibians, and waterbirds. In one part of the landscape, the heavy buffaloes move through the reeds, creating narrow paths, mud wallows, and shallow ponds. In another, Konik horses quietly graze, keeping the ground more open and making space for wildflowers, insects, and feeding birds. The two species do not perform the same job, but that difference is exactly what makes them so important. As the dense reed cover began to open up, reed density dropped to around 50 to 70% in many areas, and the water was no longer trapped in darkness. Sunlight could once again reach the shallow ponds, helping water circulate more freely. In these restored areas, dissolved oxygen levels became more stable, creating conditions that allowed aquatic insect populations to increase by around 30 to 70%. The return of dragonfly larvae, water beetles, and other small organisms amazed the ecologists when they came back and saw the wild landscape in front of them. A place that had once been nothing more than a thick, silent blanket of reeds was now filled with buzzing insects, the gentle movement of water, and small ripples created by young fish. As insects became more abundant, small fish had more food. When small fish returned, larger species such as perch, young pike, and carp had a reason to move back into the shallow channels, causing fish numbers in some areas to rise by around 1.5 to 2 times. And when life began moving beneath the water, the sky changed as well. A richer food supply attracted more water birds back to the area, with bird numbers increasing by around 20 to 50% in some places. White storks, gray herons, cormorants, glossy ibises, white-tailed eagles, and Dalmatian pelicans, one of Europe's largest, rarest, and most impressive birds, were able to return to feeding grounds they had once lost. Rewilding Europe now describes Ermakiv Island as a place of high biodiversity value. But perhaps the most powerful image was not in the sky. It was right there in the mud, the first buffalo calves being born. By 2024, Rewilding Danube Delta reported that the buffalo herd on Ermakiv had adapted well and was reproducing every year. A restoration project does not only need animals to survive, it needs new life to continue being born. And in a place that had once been almost completely silent, the footsteps of a newborn calf were the clearest sign that the island was not dead. To be honest, Ermakiv is not an isolated story. It is only one small piece of a much larger vision that Rewilding Europe is pursuing, restoring some of Europe's most important natural landscapes by bringing back the processes that human activity once disrupted. Nature does not always recover just because we plant more trees, build more structures, or impose more control. Sometimes what needs to be done is simpler but far more difficult. Return water to the places where it once flowed, bring large animals back, and allow the food chain to function the way it did thousands of years ago. You can think of an ecosystem like an old machine that has had many of its parts removed. Replacing just one screw will not make it work again. That is why water buffalo are only one part of the solution. They open up dense reed beds and create mudflats and shallow ponds. Konik horses keep grasslands from growing too tall. Semi-wild cattle such as Tauros cattle play a role similar to ancient wild cattle, helping maintain open landscapes. Each species does a different job, but when they share the same landscape, they create a level of diversity that machinery would struggle to imitate. And this story is not limited to the Ukrainian side of the border. Just across the border in Romania, the Danube Delta is also home to several remarkable restoration projects. In Mahmudia, in the Karasuhat area, WWF helped transform around 924 hectares of farmland, an area equal to more than 1,300 soccer fields, back into wetlands beginning in 2016. Within just a few years, fish, birds, and many plant species had clearly begun to return. Earlier restoration projects in Babina, covering around 2,100 hectares, and Cernavka, covering roughly 1,580 hectares, also showed positive results after only a few years. This reveals a powerful truth. When people stop suffocating nature and give it back its water, space, and time, it can recover far faster than we imagine. As the wetlands began to come back to life, people also had a chance to return, not to drain them all over again, but to finally recognize their true value. Rewilding. Danube Delta reported that in 2019, an observation tower was built on Ermakiv Island, so visitors could look out over the lakes inside the island and watch flocks of waterbirds. In 2021, a birdwatching and photography hide was added near a lake where birds rest and feed throughout the year. This is not some vague promise of ecotourism. This is real infrastructure, a place where you can stand still, hold your breath, look through a camera lens, and see pelicans, herons, cormorants, water buffalo, Konik horses, and deer sharing the same landscape. Imagine the journey beginning in Vilkov, a small town at the mouth of the Danube, where canals often take the place of streets and boats can be more important than cars. From there, a local boat operator can take visitors away from the residential area, drifting slowly through the reeds and into the quiet waters of Ermakiv. You do not hear the roar of heavy engines or the noise of a city. You hear paddles moving through the water, birds beating their wings, and wind passing through the reeds. In the distance, a herd of dark water buffalo stands in the mud like ancient shadows of the wetland. This also has a very practical meaning. A birdwatching hide is not only for scientists, it can create more trips for boat owners, jobs for guides, overnight guests for local lodges, customers for restaurants, and new opportunities for nature photography tour operators. A 2024 study found that the Danube Delta and Tulsia area received 166,411 visitors in 2019. By 2023, the region still recorded 136,979 visitors and 286,255 overnight stays. That same year, the area had 10,942 available accommodations, an increase of more than 50% compared with 2019. This shows that the Danube Delta is not just a point on a conservation map, it is already a real nature tourism market. But this story is also fragile. Reuters described Vilkov as the Venice of Ukraine in the Danube Delta, a small tourist town now under pressure from drone attacks on nearby port infrastructure. The truth is, from the very beginning, you already knew this project would never be completely safe. A landscape that had been suffocated for decades could not return to normal overnight simply because a few herds of buffalo and horses were brought back. Since 2022, the war in Ukraine has made everything. According to a summary of Ramsar reports, 96% of Ukraine's Ramsar wetlands have been directly or indirectly affected by the war, covering nearly 1 million hectares. That means even while nature is struggling to stand back up, human actions can still knock it down once again. Climate change is also pushing the Danube Delta toward a far more uncertain future. The ICPDR warns that air temperatures in the Danube Delta could rise by around 1 to 1.5 degrees Celsius, while water temperatures could increase by roughly 2 degrees Celsius. Warmer water can encourage algae growth, reduce oxygen levels, and harm fish. The Black Sea could also rise by as much as half a meter by 2050, while smaller rivers may lose between 5 and 25% of their water, especially during the summer. Imagine finally reopening a lake so fish can return, only to face longer summers, warmer water, lower oxygen levels, and a sea of reeds slowly taking over everything again. The most frightening part is that the same old mistakes could still be repeated. In 2025, WWF Romania warned that around 2,500 hectares of land in the Karasuhat area of the Danube Delta were at risk of being drained again for agriculture. To some people, this may look like land that could be used more efficiently, but to the ecosystem, it is a flood barrier, a natural water filter, a fish nursery, a carbon store, and a resting place for migratory birds. That is why this story does not end with the image of buffalo walking through the mud. The future of Ermakiv Island has not yet been fully written. The water buffalo have survived, adapted, and produced a new generation on land that was once nearly silent. But that does not mean the island has been saved forever. Water still needs to flow in the right rhythm. The reeds can still return. War, climate change, and poor human decisions can still disrupt this fragile recovery. But the story of the Danube Delta leaves us with a powerful lesson. Nature does not always need more human control. Sometimes what it needs is for us to step back, correct our mistakes, return the water, return the mud, and bring back the large animals that once kept the landscape alive. A buffalo does not understand the concept of ecosystem restoration. It simply eats, walks, wallows in the mud, and follows its instincts. Yet those ordinary actions can create a path for life to return. What do you think? Should humans intervene to restore nature, or should we allow nature to heal on its own? Leave your thoughts in the comments below. And if you want to hear more true stories about how animals can transform entire ecosystems, don't forget to subscribe to the channel.